schools, again, for most of us, have played a very big role. And so that is where there's a current legislation that is being proposed, and salon, spa managers, owners, along with stylists and consumers, have the opportunity to comment on how they are appreciative or challenged by the current rule and stature. So with that being said, that is another reason why we felt it to be important to make sure that we are getting our voices heard for content. So there's Claudia. Claudia Fabian, who's joining us, is someone who I think really is a master of getting the word out, right? She runs a fantastic Instagram brand, podcast brand, the Beauty Debut. Really in 5 years, Claudia, maybe 6, has gone from starting her Instagram, to 305 followers now. I mean, like, really powerful. Claudia, anything else you wanted to add on your background in the beauty business and licensure?
Yeah, it's I think I'm close to 4 years on doing Instagram. It's been 4 years.
Amazing.
Sorry, had a little menopause brain fog there. I have been in the beauty industry for 30 years as a makeup artist originally, and that's my passion. But then also as an esthetician, and then, worked in med spa. So I've worked in most areas of the beauty industry, product development, and then getting to work in sales and managing sales teams and outside sales. So I feel like I have a good understanding of each dynamic and each stage of the beauty career and how wonderful it is. And, it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. And like many of you, we get into this because we want to help people. We want people to feel good about themselves. And it's a beautiful art form. And anything that I can do to help support it and give back to an industry that's been so good to me, I'm always happy to do so.
Which is fantastic, Claudia. Amazing to have gone that far in 4 years with your Instagram, but clearly a really relevant topic, which is amazing. So thank you again for being here. And then Frank Zona, ultimately salon owner, Boston. And I just have to say, in case anyone is unaware, the current legislation that got passed with the tip tax law, there is one major person who is responsible for that, and he's right in front of you right now. Frank Zona has had this passion for the last 25 years, Frank, moving the ball forward for salon and spa professionals to be able to enjoy some of the tax benefits that other industries enjoy. And for salons and spa professionals who get income from from tips, to not have to pay, a portion of their taxes. It's everyone owes this man a cup of coffee. So with that, Frank, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your salon group?
Sure, Susan. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here and contribute however I can. And yeah, so I'm third generation salon owner. I grew up in salons. My grandfather came across the Atlantic from Sicily as barbers, he and his brothers. And so my family started as barbers, evolved to hairdressing, because barbering in the 1940s was more Mayberry. There really wasn't much money to be made there. So they turned to hairdressing. We're in the school business. My dad had a school in Boston, pre-Title IV, back in the 50s. And so we grew up sweeping hair, child labor, every form of regulatory violation there could be happened in our family. But it's an industry that, has taken care of our family. And I just believe it's part of being in business. You gotta participate, you gotta give back, and part of being in any community. So that's been it. You probably gave me a little too much credit there on the tips, because it was a long industry effort, and without the associations and that kind of collective voice, then, any one passionate person probably isn't going to make that big of a difference. But but thank you for that. And it was good to get it across the finish line. So just to say what it is, and I assume most people on the call know, but there's two in the one big beautiful bill, which inside it also deals with the Title IV rule that you're focused on right now. In also inside of that bill, where it was obviously a tax bill, were two tip income related tax provisions. One was no tax on tips for the individual tip earner. It's a little bit of a misnomer. It's not actually no tax on tips whatsoever. It's no federal income tax on tips, which means that there still may be, or still, depending on the state tax on tips and still FICA tax on tips. And then the other provision was the employer provision, which basically reimburses the employer for the matching FICA on tips. So it's really a good win for the industry because it aligns the salon employer with the tip earner. And in the case of smaller operations where the owner themselves is an employee and a tip earner themselves, they've got both sides of it. It gives a real support to the employment model in the industry. So Susan, and I'm here, however this conversation goes, to weigh in and offer anything I can.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to tee that up too in just a couple moments by just hitting a couple of subject matters around understanding how the foundation of gainful employment and how unfortunately in this industry it has often been the case where full income has not been fully disclosed at the end of the year because there's cash payments, there's cash tips, and this gainful employment provision, it's really essential that the industry sort of rises up into the full disclosure of income. And so this is where this slide that's in front of you right now kind of speaks to the 90% of us really working in the industry today start somewhere in a beauty school, right? Obviously, the goal is then to graduate, and these are already federal Department of Ed KPIs that schools that work with the Department of Ed for Title IV funding, are already being measured on in the school. So how many people start in your school? How many people graduate from your school? How many people get licensed who took, your programs? And then how many of them found employment? Those first four key benchmarks we are audited on every year from the Department of Ed. So when we're enrolling people in school, we're always talking about where do you want to work after you graduate, right? Tell us about the salon. If you do run into any challenges during the time of your program, whether that be transportation, childcare, what have you, how do you think you would manage that in order to be successful to graduate? Because again, if any of these numbers fall short of the government's level of expectations, it can put a lot of stress on the school, the administration, and the faculty. So we just have this conversation right away in the beginning before students are even considering. This is a career college program that we're working for. So once they're in salon employment, the graduate's goal is then they have to verify that they are actually working. We can't just go on Instagram and take a screenshot. Usually we're asking for some email communication that indicates from the owner, what have you. So for the owners that are on the line, it's really important management to make sure if you do hire someone out of a beauty school program to call and notify them where they are working for proof or verification, of employment. Most salons do wind up doing some form of job training. I think every salon and spa, whether you're on the spa side or the salon side, the nail side, massage, everyone is getting some degree of training, whether it's just about how do we like to have it done here at this organization, or we all know what 1,500 hours provides, right? And you got New York and you've got Los Angeles, who are both at 1,000 hours, right? California and New York are down to 1,000 hours, and New York's been at 1,000 hours for some time. There is a large portion of the industry who are trying to lower the barrier of entry into the industry down to potentially 1,000 hours and then get that nationwide. Ultimately, to be honest with you, I'm kind of a fan of it, right? I think that we can get people in the industry, we can, get their foundation built. We certainly know it takes, I mean, if you're Malcolm Gladwell from The Tipping Point, he'll tell you that in his assessment of many industries, 10,000 hours is a minimum for getting to that tipping point of confidence, comfort, skill, etc. So training is definitely needed beyond, but hopefully with a beauty school education, the degree or the volume of training is hopefully a little bit less for the salon owners and managers, because otherwise, if this start did not occur, this would be a lot more, and it would be very expensive for salons and spas to have, long-term, 2-year-long apprentices, in the program on the job training, things of that nature. Along with the job training that happens after they verify, their place of employment, claiming income is really a critical feature here today. We really, in this industry, and Frank, you could tell me if you think otherwise, but the government is kind of saying, if people are taking Title IV funding in the salon and spa industry, the government needs to see a return on their investment, and that they're looking for, good careers where they are tax-paying citizens. They kind of looking for a little ROI, right? And with that, we all know the benefits of claiming a high income. However, it's just an important piece of the puzzle, because the new legislation basically puts the responsibility on beauty schools to indicate that they are at a minimum level beyond what you could make out of high school without a certification or degree. And so, and of course, with your income, it's paying taxes. So we'll get into it a little bit more, but I always like to go over this wheel, because these are all the steps in the first 2 years that a new graduate, whether again, salon or spa, working on, do need to work through. You can hit the QR code is on every slide. And this is where you can actually go to the government comment area directly and leave a comment at any point during this presentation today, if you feel provoked to do so. So with that being said, why is this rule for gainful employment a little flawed? Number one, the rule is based on 40 hours. And you guys may or may not know, based on your own schedule, but that in the salon industry today, the average professional is working between 25 and 35 hours in a hair salon. And I even saw something as low as 22 hours. And I've seen 32 hours. So the range is out there depending on who you're getting your data from. But the bottom line to it is the current legislation is really based on a 40-hour work week. And most people work in this industry because they enjoy the fact of having flexibility, to do other things, and not have to work excessive amount of hours. Number two is the time it takes to build a steady clientele. It does take time. And as commission or hourly pay or whatever direction people are, it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years to build a solid clientele where the income goes up dramatically in those first 5 years. But based on gainful employment and our financial overview, which I think we hit here in a little bit of slides, that starting off, someone who graduated from beauty school and they come and work in a professional salon, even during training, is going to have to be more in a $15 to $18 an hour range in order to be gainfully employed. Again, the average week reach I hit, and I didn't really hit it, but it is obvious that the majority of most salons are women. And so women tend to be caregivers for their family, their children, their parents, what have you. And so because of, it really is a ruling that tends to affect women more, probably in the workforce. And so, again, we believe that there's a bit of a gender gap in the current ruling as well, and that unfavorably affects women more so than others. And lastly, is why this ruling is flawed, is that unreported tips. It's hard for the school owners to be responsible to ensure that graduates, are reporting full income. And it is our goal that all salon professionals do, report their full income. But and we train to it, we coach to it throughout school. But it has been an issue in the past that's affected our ability to get legislation passed, because sometimes stylists are claiming very low income wages. So what can we all do? Tip education, encouraging tip, encouraging income, full income, being acknowledged on annually. Not only, of course, makes you're able to do mortgages and other things, but in general, it just makes the industry look better. And so we just are hoping to spread the word around the value and benefits for all of us as an industry when we claim the real income that we're making. You can't go to a bank and get a mortgage and then say, but I know it says I made 45,000, but I really made 70,000. I just don't claim my gratuities. Well, the bankers really, they just don't like, oh, okay, let's give you more money. They're going to limit that based on what your income, ratio looks like. So with that being said, we're doing a lot of different training in the industry to ensure new stylists are feeling comfortable and confident. So I do encourage salon professionals. It's interesting. I just got finished meeting with someone and who's a salon owner as well. They have an ATM in their salons. No tips go through the register. All tips get handed directly off to the service provider. If someone claims, they claim. If they don't, they don't, right? But the salon owner, is trying to be mindful of what they're paying as well. And I think that this, again, perpetuates the industry issue, which is that it doesn't look like where you can make good money. And of course, we all know that is very much the case. They make very good incomes in the salon and spa industry. But again, what can we all do to kind of move forward? Loan repayment, just so that for salon owners who may or may not know, that, typically these are average loans that students who graduate from a beauty school are taking out. And this on average is kind of what their monthly payments are. And I just think it's nice to know, because I think sometimes salon owners who are looking to recruit more salon professionals out of beauty school potentially may want to help pay back some of these student loans. So for cosmetology dependent and independent, depending on how much they borrow, because they can take living expenses and so forth, either $120 or $200 a month is what their payments are. And cosmetology for Chicago is either $9,800 or $16,000. And again, these are the costs per month that a graduate starts paying 6 months after graduation, which I think is super important for salon owners and managers to know that this is now part of the economic formula for my living in my apartment, my car payment, my phone, all that other good kind of stuff, to know that this is on average where loan repayment is at. Estheology is another program that is run, that runs Title IV funding. And in our school environments, if you're dependent or independent, that's kind of a bit of where those borrowed amounts can be. And then again, the loan payments for estheology today. And in Chicago, because it just is a different market, thought we'd highlight, the borrowed amount. It's 750 hours in Chicago. It's 600 hours in Wisconsin. And that does make up where that major difference is. But it's $50 or $89 a month as estheticians. How much do you have to pay a month? Massage therapists, again, this is their dependent and independent. We teach massage in Madison and Milwaukee, and this is why we're just highlighting the Wisconsin region. $50 or $89 a month is basically what massage therapists are paying back for their loans. So moving into the no tax on tips, legislation. Frank, I don't know if you want to speak to this slide at all, but basically it just started in 2025. That meant licensed beauty professionals qualify to deduct 25,000 in reported tips from their federal tax income.
Yep, the slide's right. And probably the key bullet point on there is right in the middle that tips must be properly reported, and that remains the challenge of the whole thing, whether it's claiming a deduction or showing up on a tax return to help the Title IV schools be able to withstand a rule. So it's the challenge right now is to get the actual earnings formalized, and it's a real challenge for, I think, the Title IV schools right now, just from a timing point of view, right? Because you need comments by the 20th, so we're 7 days away from comment deadline, and I think one thing to keep in mind, Susan, and I hope this approach is okay, just have a conversation. I'm not even positive who's on. I assume it's mostly salon owners, some school owners, some folks.
Mostly salon owners or stylists. Yeah,
Good,
managers.
Good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it helps everyone to know all the different perspectives, but there's a lot of government research and data behind their position, so they feel very firm. I would say is a fair word in where they stand on their rules, and it's been gainful employment's been wrestled with for a number of different administrations, right? So the comments, what I would advise is that they're not comments that just say, "I love this industry," this is what it's meant for me. Not that that doesn't matter, but I think it's really trying to substantiate something. So, for what it's worth, one thing I don't see being argued that could be more emphasized is the fact that the rule is inside of one big beautiful bill, which also included the tip provisions. So there hasn't been the time to. So the tax bill put forward two things at the same time, one which relies on the other a little bit. I don't know how exactly you articulate that, but it's kind of true that there'd be an assumption that tips are going to get reported since it's now incentivized to get reported on both sides. But it's going to take at least 2 tax seasons to start to see that show up in any metadata, right? That they can rely on. So if I was
too, Ed Cramp was on last week's call and said that the government didn't get the form updated before the income tax time was due for April. And so as a result, the line item wasn't there. So that, I think, is tangling all of 2025 reporting. And for those who did say, well, I'm going to claim it full because, look at all the benefits I'm going to receive, right? So I think it'll be interesting. I think to your point, it will take 2 years, a minimum, before we really see any data from it.
Yep. But I think there's a lot of people who are still not reporting across the industry. And part of that is because many people understand or hear, and they're right, that the no tax on tips provision is temporary. So it expires in 2028. So there's a fair amount of people who kind of reach the conclusion that, okay, I haven't been reporting tips, so they're already tax-free. It's illegal, but in a philosophical sense, they're tax-free. And now I'm going to start reporting them so I can get a tax break. And then it's going to go away in 3 years. And I'm going to do what? I've just raised my hand and now I'm going to go to jail, which isn't going to happen. But that's what people kind of rationally think. So it really is on owners, school owners, salon owners, et cetera, to really help people understand that's not really what's going to happen. I mean, first of all, the industry needs to already be talking about extending that provision. Chances are I would think naturally it will be. It'd be hard to take something like that away. But especially if it's getting uptaken, it's getting used and people are actually seeing it in their paychecks. But I think actually understanding the rules that, the tips have to get reported, not overstepping, because it really is hard. The law is that uh, uh, employers tips are considered wages paid by the employer for FICA tax purposes. So every month, employees are supposed to report what they earned the previous month by the 10th. So by the 10th of June, everyone's supposed to report what they earned in May, and you're supposed to have a system for that. Well, many owners go beyond that and just control the whole thing, and that does get you higher compliance. It can open up some other risks because tips also are under the jurisdiction of the Department of Labor as a property issue. So you can't overstep on that angle either. You have a tax liability, IRS, you have a labor and property issue with the Department of Labor. So that kind of touches in tip pooling. You'll see that from time to time in the news at a restaurant, grabs all the tips and takes a percentage of it. So there's a lot of sensitivity around that. You just have to know. It's not rocket science, but you do have to step carefully. But at the end of the day, anytime I've explained to a stylist, one-on-one, what even Social Security is, what FICA is, that's theirs. We've brought in Social Security speakers, and you just see people's faces light up and said, that's I did not even understand that. So it's basic financial literacy approached patiently. It can really help people see that it's in their benefit. And then I think being on top of the fact that the no tax on tips, so I mentioned that people would hesitate to report thinking it's going to go away, but they also hesitate to report because they think, well, I'm not going to get that money until the end of the year, until I file my taxes, and then maybe I'll get a bigger refund. But the truth is you can adjust your W-4. And that's what most owners should be doing now, is reviewing their quarter one, talking with their payroll company, really getting close to it, and then having a campaign to get people's W-4s adjusted so that they're seeing more money in their paycheck every day. So I'm going to pause there, Susan. Is that helpful?
Yeah, very helpful. I think ultimately, is there anything though that hairdressers or salon owners, spa therapists should know about helping in 2 years to get this tip tax law continued?
Yeah, I think staying plugged in with the messaging of the associations, I think that will be part of it. I think if they're seeing benefits from it and really succeeding, um, letting people know, like just being, it's a good. Uh, uh, I've testified a couple times to Congress on it, and if Congress asked me today, well, how do you know that this has been beneficial? Because I walked through a conference recently, ISBN, and had people say that brought $90,000 back to the business, right? And individuals have walked up to me and said, wow, I got a $1,500 return. I mean, it's showing up. There's no doubt about it. It's good. That's good policy. The industry, there's some parts of the industry that's a little politically sensitive and didn't love the overall bill, et cetera. And you get to kind of separate yourself from that and say, look, if we're just talking about these provisions, this was good policy. Like, it was smart. And when people say, well, it could get abused by hedge fund people who are going to claim their income as tips, not really. It phases out at 150,000. So if it's a big salon owner who's making that much money, they're not going to they're not going to benefit from the no tax on tips. It really is tip earners, and anyone who thinks it's unfair should take a tip job and see if they're willing to work weekends and nights and you know.
Well,
So
I think
if
the promising thing here for the future is that both the left and the right agreed on a tip tax. So hopefully, as we move forward, this will be able to stay in good effect. Because right now, most salon owners not only are getting charged a 3% service fee on, the credit card use for the gratuity, it's also getting hit with the FICA and Social Security before this legislation got out there. So salon owners were paying a lot for 100% of money that was going to the team member. And
and
again, I
that's
don't know that many,
on
team understand how that all works and how expensive it is to allow tipping on credit cards.
It's a good point. I think transparency is the best friend here. Teaching people about the money, usually imagination usually skews to something negative, and the truth of our industry is usually a better story than what people imagine. Um, but I think for the owners on the call, it's really important too that they understand how to make sure that they've claimed the 45B credit and that they understand that you claim it at the entity level if you're an S corp, and then receive it in the 1040. But knowing the mechanics of it, making sure you've got an accountant who's informed. Many aren't. Like there's the assumption that, well, those many people in the industry don't understand tip compliance or don't understand taxes or tax law. Well, guess what? Not every tax person has got every box checked either. And many salon owners use an accountant who, if they asked, am I your only salon? The answer would be, well, yes. So, you really want to make sure that you understand the provisions and how to take advantage of it.
For sure. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Frank. Um, I need to just move a little bit further into the programming. I hope everyone took a little bit away from the tip tax provision. But this is kind of a general analysis that we did for the service cost breakdown at 20 hours. So what we did is look at a number of services per day, massage, aesthetics, nails, and hair. The average cost of an hour service, some of us work in hair salons that do 30-minute services, 45, and some nail services, a lot of hairdressers sometimes do 30-minute services in an hour. So generally coming up with the cost per hour at 95, 85, 55, and 70. Again, assuming that they're seeing 1.5 guests during the time. Daily working an 8-hour shift. That would be, the 5 services times 95, let's say, is 475. Working on average 20 hours. And again, the math continues to roll. Annual revenue and the salon, the estimated 20% on tips is listed there. Commission at low, 35%. Is it here? The potential potential income pre-taxed for massage at 33, aesthetics at 30, 23, and because this is based on 20 hours, right? Gainful employment benchmark for Wisconsin is 36,000 across the board. And so the goal here is to highlight that, working 20 hours, graduating from a beauty school, and then, what's needed from a gainful employment perspective, it's very difficult to graduate from a beauty school and meet the benchmarks of gainful employment if you're not working more hours, right? So I know that some people work because they're caring for either children or parents when they're not working, so they just work a couple of days a week, but ultimately, there is a ratio here for salon owners and for stylists that to be mindful of hitting over 36,000 in income. And again, if 20% of this 36,000 is in gratuities, right, that could be somewhere basically, around 8,000. right? That's in gratuities. The remaining either is coming from hourly because they're in training, or it's coming from a commission, or it could be a team-based pay. It could be an hourly based, salon. So my goal here, these are very random numbers. They're more relevant in Wisconsin than they are around the country. I do think there are others joining us from outside of the state of Wisconsin. But ultimately, this is a spreadsheet that's a simple one to put together. And then you could put your own numbers in to kind of figure out, because I think this provision of gainful employment may be requiring salon owners to raise the prices of cuts and colors, right? And or massages or facials. And I went low when I looked at the cost of services, but this provision to the consumer could affect them. If they were paying $40 or $50 for a haircut, they could be going to $60 or $70 because the individual during training is going to cost more. If they're paying $10, $12, or $14 an hour during training to get them started, they're only going to be in a 28 to 30, and that's assuming 40 hours. 28 to 30,000 a year. But if this provision moves forward, we'll really have to modify, either the prices or the hours that someone works in order to be considered gainfully employed. If we don't hit these benchmarks, schools will start losing coverage for Title IV funding. And if you miss the benchmarks 2 years in a row, Title IV gets removed from the schools. So we're lucky in Chicago, average haircut isn't $40. The average haircut is more in the 60 to 70 range. So Chicago passes, Illinois passes. However, Wisconsin, we're just on the fringe, and that will potentially require either prices to go up to affect the consumers so that the graduate is more in the zone of 26 or more. 26,000 or more. 26,000 on average 40 hours is $18 to $20 an hour. So ultimately, that's just what I wanted to deliver as a general messaging for salon owners and stylists who are on this call, that you're going to be in a position to have to start monitoring it. Because I think, again, if 9 out of 10 of your stylists or your spa therapists graduated from a beauty school, those beauty schools will be at risk because the IRS is going to talk directly to the Department of Ed to see that this cohort who went to this beauty school are graduated and now are claiming that their income in their first and second year was X. If they're claiming 16,000 or 20,000, and you get that across the entire group of graduates, the school will be at warning in the first year. The second year, they could use Title IV funding. How many people on this call that are licensed professionals didn't take out a student loan? Most people do. In our schools, I would say 6 to 8 out of every 10 students are taking out student loans. So it would dramatically affect this, moving forward. So are there any questions on this spreadsheet that's in front of me? So ultimately, what we can do is to take action and say, we think the provision, the way that the legislation is written is appropriate. And ultimately, we should, hold beauty schools accountable to monitor how many hours I work or how the salon owner pays people, things like that. Or, they're kind of putting all schools, in the same category. But in this industry, this dramatically affects women. A lot of the people in this industry don't work full time, which is what this legislation was based on. And again, everyone after they graduate from a beauty school program is going to have to make over 36,000 in their first 2 years, or they will fail this gainful employment benchmark that the government is setting. And so we really need to take action with this. And so talk to your friends out in the industry, let people know, have the conversation, because if beauty schools aren't there are some cities that it's 100 miles to the nearest beauty school. So if you want to work in the industry and you don't want to just go with an apprenticeship program with the salon that's in the city that I currently live in, you know, they're moving or having to drive long distances to go to beauty schools. And that's only going to get worse if more beauty schools close due to these provisions. So there is some strong numbers being thrown around, that a strong percentage, 9 out of every 10 beauty schools could close if the legislation stays as such. So we need everyone in the industry to take action. And with this, for salon owners, the costs of training new talent are only going to be going up if this provision stays in place. Because either they're going to be apprenticing them, or you're going to be doing a lot more training. You know, so with that being said, feel free to use the QR code, send a comment over, and share as you see fit. But these all need to be submitted by May 20th. And we need over 100,000 comments to really get the attention, of the legislation who are helping to make these decisions. So your voice really does matter. PBA is very active in helping to get the word out. Aveda Institutes are very active, as we are Aveda Institutes in Milwaukee, Madison, and Chicago. Paul Mitchell schools are very active. Win Claybaugh and John Paul both did social content around the legislation and how it could affect the industry negatively. And really, for the consumer, all of your clients can give comment as well, because the consumer is going to watch the cost of their services go up, because haircuts are going to have to go up because the commissions and the hourly compensation is going to have to go up to meet these needs. So with that being said, these are just some recommendations around what you could include, but the government does want individual ideas and thoughts around why you think these provisions should shift. And so they don't want you just to sign a form letter. They're really not watching that kind of stuff as much as even a short paragraph, 2 sentences, right? I think this provision unfairly approaches women. I think, most of us in the industry, I mean, a couple of salon owners that are on the call right now know that the average person works like 30 hours in this industry. So this legislation is based on full-time hours. At part-time hours, 25 hours or 30 hours, what have you, that the average dollar amount per hour will go up, because you're not spreading 36,000 over 40 hours. You're going to spread that over 20 hours or 30 hours. And that means the average cost of these services are definitely going to increase. So again, these are just a variety of comments that you could make to tell your story. And it just takes 2 minutes really to go on this. So Claudia, sorry. My goal was to ask you, because you are so good at getting messaging out. What do you think? One of your good friends, Ashley Norman, too, another very world famous hairdresser. You guys are influencers, but you're licensed. You're licensed professionals. What can people in the industry do to try to get the word out and tell the story?
As I was watching your slide, and I'm not sure like where all this, exact information about this legislation, where all this was found, but maybe as a collective, I know you have a lot of salon owners, hairstylists. So everyone that's kind of behind getting this messaging out, is there a hashtag that we all should be using? Because I think having a hashtag strategy would be really good for your social media, so that it's easy to find and you can connect with other people. And, I like the tagline, "Your voice matters,"
Right.
and letting that kind of be the pillar of the messaging, but there
Yeah.
maybe the hashtag is your voice matters, or I don't know if there's another clever hashtag that would really correlate with this mission that we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that would be really important. And then making small steps with your own social media, with your salon page, with your personal page, getting the word out, I think is the whole point. So making sure that you're speaking to the pain points that we discussed today. And I think education is always the key, right? Like helping people truly understand. Because I always say, I'm an esthetician, not a mathematician. And I think a lot of stylists and beauty professionals are like, I don't want to deal with all that stuff. I just want to do hair and do all the fun stuff, right? That's, hey, we're all guilty of it to some degree. So with that said, I think understanding it is really, really crucial. So maybe as salon owner, having a meeting with your team, encouraging them to post about it, getting their colleagues to post about it is really, it's just kind of going to be like telephone,
Yeah.
to get that word out. But I think having a strategy of hashtags would be really important. And then making sure everyone knows that we're using the messaging, your voice matters, so
Right.
that all of the messaging can kind of sound similar and that it's
Consistent.
easily recognizable on social media. And then, of course, posting to all of your platforms, maybe even doing a live question and answer.
Right.
If you have a beauty school, maybe going live on your social media and doing a live question and answer, could
Mm-hmm.
be really, really helpful. And again, these are all free avenues. There's no investment made to any of this.
Right.
And then doing educational carousel posts,
Mm-hmm.
explaining it. If you don't like talking on video, I get it. So just doing an educational post, you can do
Yeah.
a carousel slide on your social media explaining how this affects you, because ultimately that's what it's boiled down to. People are going to want to know, how is this affecting me? To
Right.
get some action under their, butt, to
Yeah.
go over and to, comment as you're wanting people to do on that link. So,
Yeah.
and then of course, sharing this link in your stories,
Yeah.
sharing the link on your social media could be really, really helpful. And I think 100,000 comments really shouldn't be hard, even with the small group we have here, because each of us knows at least 10 other people that
Yeah.
we could, motivate to go to that link. So those
You'd be
would be like
surprised, as
mine.
of
And
yesterday, Claudia, really the industry only had like 20,000 comments. I mean, it is so
part of it is people
pathetic
don't understand
how
it.
this industry
I,
moves.
well, until you told me about it, honestly, I hadn't heard of it, but
Yeah.
I'm not in a salon suite anymore or
Right.
practicing in a salon. So,
Yeah.
but I think education is really going to be what it takes. And if everyone just makes one post,
Yeah.
it kind of can ripple effect. And if
Yeah.
everyone on this call encourages people or work closely with to go and click on that link to leave a comment,
Yeah.
I would imagine in another, by the 20th, we can get there.
Well,
I would
that's the
hope.
goal. So Aveda gave someone the opportunity to speak on their last owner's call. And my sense of it was that most of the people on the call really didn't know what was going on, right? And, I just got finished talking to 200, people in my auditorium here this morning. And I said, how many guys are aware of the gainful employment issue? And they're all salon professionals and they had just no understanding of it. But I don't know, because they're already licensed and they already took out their loans. They don't really care about the next people behind them, right? But I'm like, it really matters,
Industry as a whole, it's kind of like if we set the bar high and we all rise, you know
Right.
what I mean? We have to have more of a sense of a community, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same industry and we want everyone to succeed, because if this person succeeds, that means more doors are open for me to succeed, and it just ripples.
Yeah.
So again, I think that the call to action should be, for anyone's listening with your team, it's really going to be up to you to take this information and make sure that your team or your school professionals or whatever it may be in this situation understands this whole concept, and that it just takes 2 minutes out of their day to go and click this link and add a comment. And I love that you gave suggested thought starters for the comment.
subjects.
It makes it
Yeah,
so easy because then it's like, "Ooh, what do I say? I've never done this before." Well,
right.
these are some prompters for you. I think, and I don't know if you're going to be sharing this presentation with the people on the call, but I think everyone could take this to their salons and, schools and use this slide because I think it
Yeah.
breaks it down pretty clearly.
We are recording it and then we're putting it on the Institute's YouTube page.
Good.
So that we're putting money behind it so that we can get additional reach. Because I do think it'll be a lot for future stylists to pay out of pocket to go to a prestige beauty school where they get the care and a good
Yeah.
quality environment that's upbeat, that's graduating people working in top locations in the city. And it'll certainly affect salon owners with their cost investment in training. So
But really, getting the word out is so much easier on social media.
yeah,
You can
totally.
reach hundreds and thousands, and not millions of people. And it's going to be up to each of us to, do a post about it or share a story and just get the word out and educate our colleagues about it.
Yeah. Well, anything that any of you guys can do on the call, that was one of the key objectives, was that hopefully after this call, you'll consider taking some action. And in the chat is hashtag save the beauty industry,
Oh, I
because
love that.
this is the funnel into the industry. Again, we kind of identified 8 to 9 out of every 10 people in the industry graduated from a beauty school. And the current legislation, there's no appeal if a school fails their years. And they'll get the first 2 years. That's why they're saying by 2028, you're going to start seeing failure rates across the United States, and then Title IV funding will be lost. With that, I think then the next strategy would be to lower the barrier of entry nationwide so that the cost of beauty school programs go down because they'll be doing less hours. So that, I think, FBIC is an association who is working on, nationwide licensure, because of course the U.S. military is very sensitive when military families move around North America. It is a challenge for sometimes their partners to be able to get licensed in the next state.
Yeah.
And so that's a big stressor for military families. And so the goal is, like the massage industry very successfully did, is to get a nationwide testing
Hmm.
implemented,
Yeah.
and that was super helpful. So I think we just need to be more mindful. That's what this goal is of education. We'll see as we continue to move down these paths, additional educational resources that we can help to provide by bringing experts on, like both of you, to kind of highlight what can be done. And we'll have to stay mindful of the tip tax law. And along with that, again, how schools pass or fail in the next 2 years if this legislation moves in as it is currently listed. So costs of haircuts will definitely go up across North America because all the salons are going to have to pay their people in training a lot more. And so the effect for the consumer will be great, and there'll be less people in the industry. How many salons could hire today? 5 people to put in their salon? I think most people would raise their hand and say, I could definitely take 5 more people, you know. But the reality is that the pool of candidates in the industry are less today, for a variety of reasons. So we want to make sure it's as affordable and welcoming to join the industry, not more obstacles in front of it as
Yeah.
well.
Well, I know I've shared with you before. I just think the independent, solo room scenario has really tanked our industry in so many ways, not only in standards, but it's kind of brought it down a few notches. I know a lot of people like to be independent and have their own thing, but I think that's where a lot of them don't succeed because they get out of school thinking, oh, I'm just going to go rent at Sola Salon or whatever.
Right.
And then they're out of business within the year because,
They have no
you know,
clientele. They have the
yeah.
training.
Yeah, and
Susan,
they
it's
just need
one,
they need the finesse that you get working in a
In
salon
a
group.
professional
You
salon
learn from
environment.
your peers, you elevate, and then eventually, yes, you could probably go out on your own, but straight away is the kiss of death, I think.
Yeah, agreed. We train all of our students to go find a mentor,
Yeah.
work with them. Frank?
Susan, you may take a look at the underlying research for the rule in terms of they're relying on a study called the Cellini study, and that may have excluded self-employment income. I'm not positive, but the tip income has been called out in one way, but I think the study relied on W-2 at least more heavily, if not exclusively. It's
Mm.
worth a look.
Oh, good to note. Good to note, Frank. That's a valuable point. Excellent. Well, again, the goal today in our short meeting was just to get salon professionals together, become more mindful and aware of some of the legislation right in front of us. If everyone can share with a friend, put up on a story. There's a lot of good comments out there for salon professionals. And we would just really appreciate any support. And let's stay mindful and aware as we look to move forward how the tip tax law and how both state and federal regulation can be affecting our industry. Not that it's a fun area to hang out and have to watch, but I think we just all kind of need to, because otherwise things will change without your voice. So thank you so much for all of your hard work and help, and we love and passion for the industry. Frank, Claudia, much gratitude. Be well, and thanks again for doing what you guys do. You do amazing.
You bet. Thanks all.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.